Real-world analytics is a market leader, bringing data-driven decision-making to the automotive industry in the most safe, secure and direct way. Our motor industry experts have designed a solution to help you get transparency of your business while increasing margin and improving cash flow. You are loaded with data and spend a lot of time and effort collating reports, trying to get the information you need, at which time it may be out of date and decisions are then made on gut feel. Our solution pulls from your DMS system and integrates this information with any other data source, such as budgets, targets, and third-party applications, such as CRM, Showroom, and VHC. This data is enriched, and all of your main KPIs are displayed on one visual dashboard. Track your sales and margin performance against targets across new and used vehicles, parts, and labour. Manage vehicle and part stock across your group. Benchmark dealerships and their staff on their KPIs in order to motivate them to do their best. Automated reports are delivered directly to your team's inbox, so they can access the information anywhere, at any time, on any device. Everyone in each department has the right information at the right time to do their jobs more efficiently. One version of the truth for your dealership. The solution is designed so that you can see in seconds what is happening in your business, identify problems and act quickly to resolve them, see where profit is leaking out and drill down to the detail to find out why. We unlock the power of your data. By empowering your managers with the information they need, they can focus on growing your business and increasing revenue. Your business will benefit from improved workflow, embedded efficiency, and faster, more accurate decision-making. Join the thousands of businesses across multiple industries who are using their own data to drive their business further and boost profitability. Become a data-driven dealer group now. Real-world analytics. Visit our website or submit your email now and let's discover your potential together.
Yeah, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this little section on leadership in a virtual world. And we've got 20 minutes just to go through something relatively high level. And there's a really good quote on this slide where we've got leadership is the ability to translate vision into reality. And with what's happened in 2020, God, do we need some leadership, and do we need some vision, and do we need a new reality? So I think Warren Bennett was absolutely spot on with this, and let's just gently get into this presentation. And just to give you an idea of the brief that I was given for this section, and it was workplaces have become very dispersed in 2020 due to the pandemic. This has driven innovation and how business leaders interact with their teams, keep motivation and inspiration high, and drive teams towards achieving their shared goals. And in this strategic keynote session, we'll examine best practices in remote leadership, including some case studies and examples. And just to explain why we've probably been asked to do this, that we at Sewell's have been at the forefront of leadership development and business improvement in the automotive industry for over 56 years. And so we've got some valuable insights to share. So I hope you're ready. Just to put this in some context, it was Lenin who actually said, there are decades where nothing happens, and then there are weeks where decades happen. And that is just so true for 2020, or what happened from really the 23rd of March 2020 when we went into our first lockdown. And this has never been so true as it is in 2020. And, you know, the world of leadership has changed and the world of digital has changed. And a tidal wave has swept through organisations that are driving massive change and sometimes chaos. and leaders and followers were actually forced into like a brave new world, and for the most part they had to accept it, because the digital piece has been around for quite a while and people were tinkering with it all, and from the 23rd of March there seemed to be no option. So we were almost forced into Teams, we dabbled with it, we'd forced into Zoom, forced into Skype, forced into FaceTime, different things, and really decades happened. I think what's actually happened in that time, from a digital point of view, it'd probably taken us 5 to 6 years to get to at the same point where we are now, and even though we've done that and we've adapted amazingly well on occasions, it's also brought some confusion around how to best lead and drive success. It's changed the dynamic, and you'll all be well aware of that from your own experiences during 2020. The digital revolution, however, needs proper leadership. Again, I just mentioned the digital revolution been coming for some time, and whilst it's been gathering pace for a while, 2020 has shown us that change can be forced upon us more quickly than we would naturally choose. And leadership, proper leadership, will play a big role in that. So onto the leadership piece. There's a lovely quote by Warren Buffett here, who said, "It's only when the tide goes out you find out who's been swimming naked." And again, I just think that's so relevant, because the tide has gone out big style and some people have been found swimming naked big style. And technology is great at creating new and better ways of working. That's what technology should be for. There's been a bit too much emphasis, in my view, on the digital being about technology, and the reality is that there's too much emphasis placed on the technology, and the digital world is actually not about technology. It's still about people. And the leadership piece, it's less than a digital revolution and more of a thinking revolution that's going on. People have changed their thinking. They may have been forced to, but that change has now been pretty well established. It's been implemented. And I don't think we're ever going to get the genie back in the box. And why should we? Because there's a lot of opportunity that comes from the digital piece. And again, leading people in a digital age is about managing the thinking, their attitude, the mindset, and the behaviours with the assistance of the technology. It's not the technology first, leading people. And my emphasis in this particular presentation is on the leadership piece, not the technology piece. And so it should be, because that's what it's about. So some not so best practice that's going on here is during the first lockdown and furloughing, managers made no contact with members of their team. Can you believe that? People were working from home or furloughed, which means they could not work. And I can't tell you the number of people who contacted us and said, a month in, 2 months in, 3 months in, I've had absolutely zero contact with my manager. And that just beggars belief. I mean, people were in a complete vacuum. They had no idea what the future held, no idea whether the jobs were set, no idea. So the way that a lot of managers actually can manage that situation was silence. I mean, you couldn't make it up. The working from home, again, that's been around for a while, but never really been established. when we had no option, people took to it like a duck to water. But with many managers, the not so best practice, the only contact that was made was an email from managers at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning in the form of a to-do list with the instruction it was to be completed by 5 p.m. on Friday. And that was regarded as sufficient communication. Again, you couldn't make it up, but the examples that we've heard about where that has happened, so true. On the flip side, you go from no contact or little contact to micromanaging in the extreme, with the manager tracking practically every hour and every minute of the team's activities. And all that managed to do, in our view, as people have related it back to us, was to just destroy trust and confidence. So, great quote from Napoleon here. The leader's role is to face reality and deal in hope. Not leave people in a vacuum, not leave people in the dark. Face reality. We can't avoid the reality. We've got to face it first and foremost. And once we accept it, then let's start dealing in hope as to what the future brings. And our research also shows that many people in leadership positions have upped their game and should be very proud of what they've done. And not only up their game, they've upped the game of all the senior and the middle managers as well. A number of leaders have created or updated a new mission or a purpose for the organisation, more relevant to the world that we live in now, and together with a compelling change vision and a recovery plan to cope with the challenges and the consequences of COVID-19. And that's the hope piece. It's a case of we've got a plan and this is the direction that we're going in. It's maybe more customer focused than it's ever been, because it needs to be, because at the end of the day, the fastest way for any company to go broke is no customers. So let's get real customer centricity on this, but at least giving people hope that, there's a plan, we're working to it, and we're going to get through this and come out of it stronger. They've been communicating the plan with passion and clarity, so everyone understands the direction for change and the team and what the team is trying to achieve, and more importantly, why. And the really best leaders, the best practicing leaders, the three things, any changes that are coming: why are we doing this? Why are we doing it now? And why are we doing it in this way? And then the most important part is then saying, this is the plan and this is what we're thinking of doing, but we haven't got all the answers. We need your help. Those are really powerful words. Again, we work on a simple basis. When you hire a pair of hands, you get a brain for free. Use it. Try and get people to come up with ideas. A lot of people got a lot of thinking time, had a lot of thinking time. They'll have come up with some really good ideas to maybe complement yours or even challenge the plan, but to make the plan better. Nothing gets a sense of ownership and a sense of passion and a sense of, let's do this together, great team spirit, than engaging people in that way. And some managers, they're inspiring and motivating the teams to exceptional work and produce outstanding performance and results, recognizing that once people know the why, they can generally figure out the how. They don't need to be told all the detail. They can figure it out. When you hire a pair of hands, you get a brain for free. Use it. Some examples of best leadership, best practice in leadership is, from the start of the first lockdown, weekly team meetings on Zoom, and then regular one-to-one calls with each individual. It's almost like the communication should be in a team meeting, preferably with the chief executive officer, and then supported and cascaded down with the senior team. But then the motivation piece, the inspirational piece, should be done with the regular one-on-one. Communicating groups, motivate individually, one-to-one calls. It was very interesting. We talk about one-to-one calls. One of the leaders was telling me that the one-to-one calls he makes, because he does that on a regular basis anyway, he decided with lockdown that he'd do Skype or FaceTime or Teams or whatever. And he said, I just realised that all of a sudden people weren't taking my call. And part of the reason for that, he said, I didn't realise I scared them because I was doing face-to-face. And because I didn't explain why we're doing this, I didn't explain why we're doing it now, and I didn't explain why we were doing it like this. So they just started to think, oh, there must be an ulterior motive. And all I wanted to do was get closer to people and get people feeling a sense of involvement, because I was taking some time out rather than just speaking to them as I'm driving along in the car or whatever. I'm actually eyeballing them on a screen. But I even had to explain something that simple because they put their own spin on it. Interesting. And again, each call starts with how are you and how are your family? How are you feeling? And even if people are not quite right, rather than saying what's wrong with you and what's troubling you right now, and what help and what support do you need from me or from the organisation? And the best leaders I've seen in this crisis are the great listeners and are empathetic. And through that, they build real trust. They build a real sense of value, a sense of appreciation. And when people feel that way, they then subsequently give their best. So it's almost, you give it out in spades, you actually get it out in buckets. I think the extra time created by less travel, and there's a really big kicker on that one as well. I was talking to somebody just last week who've saved about 80% on their travel and accommodation budget, simply because they've nowhere to go. They're in lockdown or whatever. But they've used that time created by less travel to get closer to their people, to again be asking about what obstacles are that they're getting in the way of where we're trying to get to. They coach, mentor and develop people to become change ready in order to improve performance and results. They've really got close to their people, and the people have responded accordingly. And then leaders remind people of, again, the new mission, the new direction, a compelling change vision, and again, ask for ideas on how it can be implemented, what suggestions, what improvements they've got. And honestly, that just changes the whole dynamic. And of course it would, because, people just love to be involved in that process, listen to, and ideas that they come up with being implemented. And leaders see it as their responsibility to communicate brilliantly and engage well with their managers, so that the communication as it goes down through the organisation is amplified rather than being filtered. I hope you can relate to all these, because these are just from our observations during that time, and some observations from the 2008 financial crisis, where again we were helping organisations come back from a really bad situation as well. And again, real leaders know that human beings become on the outside what they think about on the inside. So they help their people focus their thinking. And what that actually means is that there's three areas which occupy all our thinking space. And the first area is a really big area, the area of concern. And these are actually the things that more often than not, we can do nothing about. Absolutely nothing. And so what happens with this is much of our life force is given up to things. I'll give you an example. I played golf at the weekend, and I was with a couple of my friends, and 4 hours it takes me to get round a golf course, and 3.5 hours talking about the US presidential elections and all the different consequences of what's happening over there. And all very interesting topic. And it was like, and you can't have your thinking space in areas being used up by areas you can do nothing about, because that's the loneliest place in the world and the most frustrating place in the world. So area of concern. Next area is much smaller, and this is the area of influence, where we don't have complete control over it, but we can influence. So you maybe go to the boss and say, I've been thinking about a new way of doing this, improving this, getting closer to the customers or whatever. I need your help and support on this. And you can't do it, but you can influence somebody who can make the decisions on how to do it and actually implementing it. And the smallest area in the thinking space is actually the area of control. And what's amazing, and I'm going to recommend that you actually ask people, what are the thinking times in terms of the area of concern? What are they thinking about and how much time? The area of influence and the area of control. And you'll probably be shocked to find that probably 80% of your people's thinking is in the area of concern, that they can do nothing about. And if anything kind of absolutely kills people's energy and creativity and passion and enthusiasm and go and the get up and go, is when you focus in all the areas that you of concern that you can do nothing about. Got to really focus on the area of control if we want to get the best out of people. And one of the things I always ask people to find for, have you ever tried doing a jigsaw without the lid? It's really hard. You need a picture for the future. You got all these different pieces, and I'm a piece, and I have no idea where I fit in, because I'm not concentrating on the area I can control, and I'm not concentrating on the new vision or the new purpose and living, eating and breathing the values or the behaviours. I'm just focusing on all the areas I can't do anything about. We need a picture. People need a picture, and they need a bit of a plan to say, we're going to get from here to there, and just watch us go, and then people will join in. I think, as one of the best leaders I know said, the leadership job hasn't changed. The media has. Real leadership skills were in short supply before the pandemic because there are too many subject experts in leadership roles. And the subject experts, these are people who know stuff, but they don't get people. They just don't get people at all. They don't communicate. They don't motivate. They don't inspire. They're just subject experts. They're just good at fixing stuff, valuing stuff, doing stuff, but they don't really get the people bit, the motivation, the inspiration, the building the passion, building the team spirit. And for us all, that's where the opportunity lies, in developing the real people skills, and especially in that middle management population. They sometimes get called the permafrost layer, the middle managers, because it's almost like all the good stuff that comes from the top just never gets through, and all the good ideas that come from the bottom never get through. And so that's where the real opportunity lies in terms of that middle management population. You know, let's kind of really start working on them to unfreeze that permafrost layer, so communication and ideas and everything start moving up and down the organisation properly. And the future, you know, if the COVID pandemic has taught us anything, it's that the pace and nature of change isn't going to slow down. If anything, it will speed up. And there's no way we're going to put the genie back in the bottle. Being able to get the balance right is the key for leaders. And it's the balance between harnessing and capitalising the benefits of technology and virtual working, and the need for the human interaction and the care for others. That's always a key part. And then the ability to blend the human with the virtual. We need human contact. And the context of perpetual change, painting a clear vision for change, positively framing it so that your people can be motivated and inspired. When they get on board and embrace it, you'll be amazed at the results they can achieve. But I can't emphasize enough about how much that vision is important. And just a story. This is one of the best leadership books I've ever read is by Jan Carlson, who managed Scandinavian airline systems. He was a brilliant leader. Wrote a book called Moments of Truth, and he described what was wrong. And this is what I mean about control. He described what was wrong with his organisation, because when he took over, it was a mid-table, nondescript national carrier for Scandinavia. And when he first got in, 3 months going all over the world, just asking people what the organisation was all about. And he summed it up beautifully. He said, after 3 months, I'd nailed it. And he said, what everybody thought is that we, as Scandinavian Airlines, flew aeroplanes. Nobody thought we flew people. And that shift transformed them and made them #1 business airline. I think it was 8 years out of 10. And that's the kind of thinking. You get people focused on something like that. How do we become the automatic choice for our customers? How do we become, the industry leader in terms of the way we look after our people? How do we become a magnet for that? Get that vision, get that picture of the future, and you will have a splendid 2021. So thank you for participating. Thank you for listening. Seeing that loads of questions coming through and things. Remember this lovely quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson: what lies before us, what lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us. We're just scratching the surface. Let's dig deep. Let's go and unlock that unused potential we all have, and to make 2021 the bounce back year that we dream of. So appreciate all that. Be your best always. Remember, you make the difference. If it is to be, it's up to me. I make the difference. So we choose. So thank you for listening, and I'll be back on the question and answer later.
Hi there, I'm Katie Saunders. I'm the Group HR Director for JCT 600. And for those of you that don't know anything about our business, we are a large privately owned motor group, mainly in Yorkshire, with some dealerships in the northeast and across Derbyshire and Lincolnshire, but mainly in Yorkshire. 54 businesses, and we have 2,300 employees working for us. I was asked to talk about virtual leadership and jumped at that opportunity actually for this event, given that subject has been the most fascinating aspect for me of this unusual 2020 that we've had. And I should start by saying really that who would have thought that in March 2020 we would be catapulted forward in terms of a whole new way of communicating and leading our businesses. I think in the main, there are businesses in the UK that have embraced video and virtual technology, but I think those businesses often are international companies. And I think, speaking very broadly about UK-based businesses, it would probably have taken several years for us to be using virtual leadership, virtual communication, video technology in the day-to-day way that we are now using it. And I think it's fair to say that our internal communication and leadership style and leadership practices changed so quickly and fundamentally in March 2020. And like many of you that are at the event today, we had no choice but to adapt in what has been the most unique and challenging of years. All of our face-to-face meetings, whether that's one-to-one or team meetings, moved to video. We all had the choice, as I'm sure you did, to choose our tech. Because we deal with 20 plus manufacturers and our leaders have different preferences, We used everything from Zoom to Skype for Business and settled as a business on Microsoft Teams. We had to adapt rapidly to new and what I would call extreme planning skills at the end of March and beginning of April this year, where really great joined up communication was needed. It was so evident that almost overnight we needed to be clear, calm, consistent, but times our amount of business communication by 20 in order to get through the challenges that we were all facing at the time. And I'm sure, like many of you, new patterns and routines emerged very, very quickly at the point that we went into lockdown on the 23rd of March. Some of those things that changed in our business, I'm sure have changed for most of you, but these routines we still have in place today. So we moved to weekly senior team communications. We have a very flat structure in JCT 600. Our board and our divisional brand directors are all very close, work very closely together with our senior finance team. And we made sure that we were talking weekly together on Microsoft Teams. And at the start of the lockdown, for the first few weeks of April, we were having daily board calls, given the volume of change in the guidelines and the challenges that we were facing. That became a daily routine. All of our one-to-one calls and conversations switched to Teams immediately, whether you are running a business as a head of business or in a group role. Everybody switched to video communication, in fact, to the point where our phones seem to have become very much last year, and we've all forgotten how much we used to use our normal phones. Like many of you, we would bring our heads of business across all of our 54 sites together, possibly 2-3 times a year in conferences. And one of the great benefits of moving to virtual communication has meant that group leadership and gathering has been made possible. And we adopted very quickly to a monthly business update to all our heads of business and group managers to make sure that communication was clear and consistent. We also moved to a group CEO monthly communication. And again, I've seen businesses that have done this via video streaming from CEOs and by See It Now technology. We stayed with a weekly written communication to all of our teams, all business, all 2,300 employees. And we used text marketing means just to push all of our people, whether they were furloughed, whether they were working, whether they were self-isolating. We text everybody to push them to go look at the JCT 600 email to read a really important monthly communication from John, our CEO. And that communication simply talked about the things that were close to people's hearts. So furlough, timings of furlough, pay implications monthly, holiday implications, and colleague wellbeing. And all of our business communication was cascaded weekly in divisions, on teams, to our heads of business and to their teams. I think it's fair to say that all of our leaders in the business have personally adapted their leadership style when faced with a completely new means of communicating. And rather than just tell you how I think they've adapted, I've talked to all of our senior divisional brand directors, all of our senior leaders, in order to tell you about the themes which really became clear to us as we all got used to a new style of leadership. All of the guys have said that they've had to relearn very quickly to humanize their communication via video. And that's because the sorts of communication that happen day to day in the office, on the phone, in the car, on the way to work, on the way home from work, all of that checking in, chewing the fat is much, much more difficult done virtually. And that is leadership. That is also leadership. So ensuring that they make space in a video call, even if it's a one-to-one call, just to check in with somebody and have that non-business conversation has become really, really important and a much more conscious choice to do. All of them have also said that there's a real collaboration, increasing collaboration and team working, because things that you might physically come together to talk about, you can do much more quickly and easily with our virtual technology. So there's actually more communication than less, more opportunities to share and discuss how one site is managing with a challenge versus another site, and whether that can be shared. That might have waited till a physical meeting, possibly for a month. And I think all of our leaders have realised that it's very easy to quickly gather everybody together on a Teams call and share some information and discuss it. There's had to be a lot more focus on personality types, and I think moving to video technology has really pushed our leaders to think about those in the team that are extroverts, who are quite comfortable to talk on a video call, those that need actually bringing into that conversation by the use of really good and specific questions. Because we all know an introvert can check out in a physical meeting. It's even easier to do that in a video call, particularly if you don't have a principle where you ask people to have their camera on all the time. So asking those really good questions and making sure everybody's engaged is, again, a much more conscious choice and decision, and something that they have to be very wary of when using video for Teams meetings. Absolutely, without doubt, our productivity as a company and individually has shot through the roof. And I'm sure many of you on this today have had the same experience, where your multi-site managers, multi-site leaders are not spending an hour, 2 hours in the morning travelling to their furthest away business at the beginning and at the end of the day. They're able to spend that time still with people, but virtually. And that's been hugely noticeable, that the productivity of our senior team has really, really increased. The word that most of our leaders use when talking about this with them is actually liberating. So for those managers that operate multi-site, it's liberating to replace those commutes with much more productive use of their time. And that's something that we definitely won't divert back to when life returns to what will be a new type of normal. That is something that we will certainly stick with as one of the really positive changes of this year. At the end of the day, though, the consistent message from our senior leaders about their style and approach has been that it is still all about people. And we've discussed it many times this year, that human need to connect, whether you are an introvert or an extrovert, having that important fundamental conversation in the same space physically with that person is still the most important thing. So whilst virtual leadership and virtual communication has now a hugely important place in what we do, and that won't change. We liken it to when email first started creeping into communication. Email has such an important place in group communication, but it's a part of communication that is not always appropriate for certain conversations or sharing information. So it's been really mindful that whilst virtual leadership is really, really important from a mental health and wellbeing perspective, that psychological need to connect in person remains true and vitally important. So in summary, it goes without saying that nothing that is done virtually really replaces that innate human need to connect when it comes to leadership. Our new virtual leadership is absolutely fantastic for communicating facts, data, tasks, providing clear direction and the sharing of ideas, and much, much more regular interaction and communication. The cost savings and efficiencies of that are there to see, to the extent that we will never go back to working in the way that we did. However, it's massively important to remember that no type of virtual technology and virtual leadership will ever replace that hugely important emotional interaction that you have when your communication is experiencing all dimensions and you get alongside somebody and be with them in the same space. That really important conversation happens in that way and isn't replaced by virtual leadership. I hope that's been helpful, interesting, something that you can relate to. Thanks very much. I look forward to answering your questions.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Paddy and I'm the Head of Operations at the National Franchise Dealer Association. Thank you very much for taking part and watching our live session on leadership in the virtual world. Can I just take this opportunity to say thank you to Dr. William Holden and Katie Saunders for their presentations today. It was very good, very informative. Thank you. And also thank you to Conal Lavery, who works for Real World Analytics, the sponsor of this event. There were quite a few things that shone through for me, guys. We're just going to open this up to discussion and questions and answers here. We've got a few from the audience already. One of the things that we were looking at was this need for human interaction. You both mentioned that quite a number of times in your presentations, and we've had a question from Helen Price. What's the best way to deal with colleagues? This is a slightly different question, but what's the best way that you find for dealing with colleagues who've been furloughed? As a leader, how are you dealing with this? Where they haven't probably had the choice. Maybe Katie, if you could field that question first.
Yeah, hi Helen, I can take that question. So it is a real challenge, particularly when the colleague doesn't have any choice in that. And we have found what's worked really well is to rotate furlough on a weekly basis now that the rules allow for that. So we maximise furlough rotation. So you have a week furloughed, a week at work, a week working from home. So we rotate those 3 ways of working, particularly with sales teams, and that has worked very well for us. And the other tip is to really maximise flexible furlough agreements. It's all about working with a colleague and it's all about compromise.
Thank you, Katie. William, how do you feel about that with regards to ensuring the leaders are communicating this properly with their staff?
Well, I think that is the key. I think the furlough thing, in many ways, my experience talking to leaders is that in many ways you can't win. And I think the feelings are deeper outside the motor industry because people have got more jobs for life rather than a high turnover. So I think we're a bit more philosophical in the motor industry. But what Katie's saying, I think, is spot on in terms of being able to balance that. But I still think the key is, as I said in the presentation, is communication. You just cannot communicate with people without becoming a complete full-time agony aunt, because there are realistic situations that we've got to deal with. But it is a case of, people are going to see it in very different ways, and it's understanding from their point of view, just as Katie said, just what exactly is going on with them and what reassurances you can give. And if you're doing a bit of a rotation in terms of furlough, that's a pretty good option, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right there, William. That's brilliant. Yeah, utilising the part-time furlough scheme as well, which I'm sure you do at JCT 600 as well, Katie. Which leads us on to another question actually regarding the enforced homeschooling, which I myself am part of with a 4 and 8-year-old as well. How are you managing that within JCT? To make sure that your employees are happy and that obviously they're giving the care that they need to their children?
Yeah, it's probably the biggest challenge of the pandemic for working parents, as I'm sure everybody would agree. And I think the key word there for me is understanding and flexibility. So we take a view very much that as long as work gets done, then we are not monitoring and checking and following up with people. We are trusting our people to work different hours. I know, speaking from personal experience, 60% of my team are homeschooling currently, and I know that some of them will log in early to do some work and then take a couple of hours to homeschool. Some of them will work in the evenings to catch up with emails and take out the afternoon to do homeschooling. It very much depends on them and their situation. And we've encouraged and have seen a far higher degree of flexibility in all our leaders around that, because everybody understands that challenge.
Absolutely. William, how do you feel about that flexibility that Kate
again,
mentions?
I think it comes to once people have got to come to the idea that homeschooling is a necessity, so it's not put them in front of the telly on the cartoon channel, that it is really important that we actually do this properly. It does come down to discipline and planning really around it all. And again, I couldn't agree more with it's a fact of you've got to fit in around, probably get the homeschooling in first. That's probably the most important thing. And then you fit everything else around that. And you do need leaders who fully understand that situation and the flexibility that's required in that.
Absolutely, thank you, William. And it leads me on to a question for Connell. Actually, Katie and yourself and William both mentioned the idea of productivity of employees that are homeschooling, potentially part-time furloughed. What can we do to ensure, how can we check how productive these people are, because our employees are, because they're using different times within the day than they might normally in a 9-to-5 job to undertake their task. Is there any sort of insight or help that you think you can give leaders in that respect, Connell?
I think in both William and Katie's presentations, the leadership skills around communication, making sure everybody's engaged, they have to be done first. Nothing will work until you actually do that. But if you want to maintain productivity, people working from home, and indeed many people have said that productivity can increase in some areas, they need to know what good looks like. So if you're going into the pandemic with not great information systems, you may find yourself scrabbling around a little bit to, manage your people like that. When I say good, the sort of jargon word you often hear is KPIs and so on, but it's just what good looks like. So if I'm the service manager, I'm the parts manager, I'm a dealer principal in one of the outlets, what is expected of me to do, and can I see whether I'm reaching those goals or not, and can I pass that down to my teams, in a way that they know what good looks like, and actually you can then use that to, turn around and circle around on this and kind of come back and sort of say, well, people are struggling somewhat from home. We don't know what people are going through when they're at home, and to praise them, for doing a good job is really, really important. But if you can't see it and they can't see it, that's going to be very, very difficult. I know that we found it in our business to be really good. You can't reward people enough with praise for doing a good job, but if you can't see that, it's meaningless.
That's a really good point, Connell. Are you looking, Katie and William, in your capacities? Are you looking at are there any new KPIs? I know you don't like particularly using that term, but are there any new KPIs that have come out of this period of remote working that you've been looking at to actually answer one of Tim's questions there regarding the balance between keeping an eye or monitoring your employees and being motivational? Are there any new ways that you've found of measuring that?
We've not needed to, because we're a business that has and uses a huge amount of data and information, and I think that again comes down to the tech that you choose, which I talked about in my presentation. That we have found that by using Microsoft Teams and sharing information, sharing all of our reporting, using the actual system to keep certain teams within a team having access to certain data, for example, so let's take service, and then having perhaps a divisional service meeting where everything that you would discuss and see and have access to in a physical meeting is there for you on the screen that you can share. I think that's the important thing. So no, we haven't agreed any new KPIs, and we certainly don't measure that whole productivity and efficiency of home working, because I don't think we're through this yet. I don't think it's really right or appropriate to do that yet. And so much a part of productive working is about trust. It's about letting go and trusting our managers and our people to do their job. That's not something that we do well as human beings. We're kind of genetically programmed to mistrust. So unlearning that and letting go and just trusting people to do the job in the time that they've got and can manage has been one of the biggest learnings, I think, from this whole thing.
That's really interesting, Katie, actually, and leads nicely on to sort of William and the skill set that you have. You know, you're a leadership trainer and you're a trainer in general. Are there any sort of items that you think that maybe people do need to unlearn in this time?
They need to unlearn micromanaging for a start, because with the homeschooling and everything else, it's just impossible to do that, and it's not a good leadership practice anyway. But I think in terms of it's just being able to flex, and maybe I was talking to a chief exec of a large dealer group the other day, and they said, you know, we've still got KPIs from the manufacturers, and does anybody think we need KPIs to be performing to the best that we can, because we've still got bills to pay, you know, and that's just an added pressure in a way. And I think it's more moving into outcomes rather than activities. You've got to do this by then, and so let's get the outcomes that we want to see. I don't know whether that's on a daily basis or on a weekly basis. I'm here as your leader, as your manager, supporter, motivator, whatever, to be here. Should you require any help, put a plan together and stick to the plan. Again, it's about discipline, but I think it is moving more towards outcomes rather than very strict and harsh KPIs. And just micromanaging is a kiss of death for so much in terms of trust and, you know, people feeling appreciated and valued, and having any kind of empathy for the situation that they're in. So that would be my take on it.
That's a great point, William. Just to move on quickly, you are rather tight for time. Just to remind all of our viewers now that if you wish to continue the conversation after our final question, please do visit Real World Analytics, beg your pardon, in their booth. You can do that by using the search function quite easily, or contact one of ourselves directly through the chat function. Just to ask the final question of you guys, which was actually posed, I think, by Tim. What one tip would you each give to help middle managers truly engage with remote workers in the virtual world? If I could start with you, Connell.
Yeah, I'll pick up from where William left off. Trust is a huge thing. Before we went into the lockdown, people wanted to work more from home in our business, and we were kind of experimenting with it. And it wasn't because we didn't have trust in the people. I think we didn't have trust in the system and the way it would work. We got thrown into it then when we went into lockdown, and actually it's worked very well. One way I think to undermine trust very quickly is to micromanage. You know, so if you can, you know, show them what good looks like, help them see what that is, and then give them the positive feedback, I think you'll win every time. You know, anywhere that we've seen our customers doing that with their groups, you know, the automotive groups that we work with, it works brilliantly.
Thank you, Connell. And William, the same question to you. Do you have a silver bullet?
Not really, because I don't think there's anything. It is all about communication, but not communication in terms of a very stilted communication. It's real empathy. It's understanding. I think there's a thing about, to understand the journey, you've got to step in other people's shoes. And it's like, get out of your own world and get into the world of the person you're speaking to. And everybody's going to be different. So you really need to empathize and personalize the communication, not just, you know, make it very bland and across the board. That would be my advice.
Thank you, William. And finally, Katie.
Yeah, I think for me, it's just about managers taking time to make time in their day. So taking that time to actually check in, even if it's just for 5 or 10 minutes, with somebody working from home or furloughed. Let's not forget, it's both those populations. Checking in with those people that aren't physically with you, just for 5 or 10 minutes, even if all you're asking is how you're doing. It is a really good way of saving time in the long term.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Katie. Just to summarise there, what we're looking at is the 3 points that we came out with is trust, communication and empathy, and taking time. So it's really adding the human back into the virtual world is what I'm getting from that. As I said to all our viewers, if you would like to continue the conversation, please do so in Real World Analytics chat room. If there's anything further that we can help you with, please do keep sending us questions and we'll make sure that we get back to you as soon as we can. But thank you very much again, and thank you very much to our speakers and to our sponsors, Real World Analytics.